last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to a brand new show of Dark Matters Radio. Now, Bill already brought them on. Bill, why did you bring them on? I haven't asked for them yet.
Yeah,
take them off, Bill.
Picking my nose right now.
Take them off, Bill. There we go. Okay. I'm going to talk to the boss about you, pal. All right. Tonight, if you've noticed over the last several months, we have had several citizen journalists that have been stretching their expertise into going into the background of a lot of the disclosure movement. First gentleman, Manny, and the second gentleman that we had on was Red Panda. Well, tonight, we decided to bring them all on together and see what exactly is going on. Now, as you may imagine, most of my career since UFO Magazine has been a one-man band. I've got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of irons in the fire. And I came across an article that kind of piqued my curiosity, purportedly from declassified CIA files. And I haven't had a chance to examine it. I didn't have a chance to really jump into it, but it was provocative. So just before the show started, I asked the fellows on the panel, well, are any of you guys familiar with this? Well, Manny was. And he kind of saved my bacon before I flashed those links on the screen. Apparently, it is a lot of bullshit. Now, with that being said, being in this field as long as I have, the powers that be have layers and layers and layers of bullshit all over this UFO field. Well, UFO's what I call it. Today, they changed the acronym once again. Now it's no longer UFOs, according to the powers that be, it's UAPs. But I can recall when they were still called flying saucers. And you know what? Doesn't matter how many times you change the name, the phenomenon is still the same. But what about the people that are allegedly in the mix of all of this? Now, the first question you've got to ask yourself, if you are an interested observer, or perhaps you're even considering jumping into the fray, is there any money involved? And if there is, what if you follow the trail to see where it leads to? Are their motives pure? Okay. Everything that has been publicly expressed does it turn out to be 100%? Or if not 100%, at least 90 or 95% true? How much resume padding may be involved in a lot of this? With Gerry Kissell, one of my weekly co-hosts, bring him on, Mark, or bring him on, Bill, and with Mark Center, my other co-host, we've talked about this many times, okay? We've even had some heated discussions over this stuff. But we got two guys tonight that are our guests. And Bill, bring them on, please. Manny and Red Panda. These are guys that have spent a lot of time digging deep down into the rabbit hole. And gentlemen, first off, welcome back to the show. It's a distinct pleasure having you here. How you guys been? Red Panda, how you been?
Been great. Great to be back.
Manny, how about you, buddy?
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I enjoy coming here and talking with you guys. And I meant to give you some props on your intro there. I love up over my corner in my office here. I've got a 2-album LP of the Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds musical, and you use that in your intro, and I love it. Every time I hear it, it just takes me back to my childhood. I grew up listening to that album. It was like one of my first exposures to like really cool like sci-fi stuff that I found in my mom's record collection when I was a kid. Would play all the time whenever I got the chance. But
well, you know,
yeah,
when I think back,
you
bet. When I think back to when I was a kid in the 50s, there were 2 films that blew my adolescent mind. The first one was The Thing with James Arness. I'll never forget the first time I saw that on black and white TV. It scared the bejesus out of me. And then the other one, of course, they had a really sweet young lady in it. Was called The Forbidden Planet with Leslie Nielsen. And that was before, and then I ought to use this as a cookie challenge test. How many of you do you recall Leslie Nielsen? Okay, who we knew from films like Airplane and other stuff, but he was the original on Disney, if you can believe it. The what the hell did they call him? The Fox. Come on, Mark, help me out here. The Revolutionary War, Swamp Fox, the Swamp Fox.
Oh, the Swamp Fox, yeah.
Leslie Nielsen.
I'm sorry, but that was even before my time there.
You shithead.
Come on,
Okay.
come on.
Okay. So anyway, guys.
I looked it up, 1959.
The year I was born, Don. The year I was born. So.
Well, you should have been paying attention, by God.
I was paying attention of internal organs, Don. So.
The Swamp Fox. Oh my God. Yeah. Well, anyway, guys, it's been a little bit of time since either of you have been on. I know you guys have still been digging deep. Manny, let me go to you first, buddy. Let me ask this. Gerry or Mark, do you have anything you want to start with, contribute or anything?
Mom, I'm doing a show.
Oh, you do? Ma, I'm doing a show.
And that's
I'm doing a show.
I just want to hear what these guys have to say about the latest. That's all.
Yeah, because they're bringing the news.
Manny, take it away, buddy.
Mm-hmm. Well, where do we start? I mean, newest to oldest, oldest to newest. I mean, there's been a lot going on in the last, probably 3 or 4 weeks. We could talk about.
Bring us up to date, buddy.
So most recently, Skywatcher HQ brought out their episode 2. It's kind of interesting. I'm not sure what these guys are going for. I think they're shooting to become like the next Skinwalker Ranch TV show, but they're privately funded. But they're trying to put together like a TV show type thing. It's real interesting. Like they're out there in the desert, and I'm just kind of curious who's paying for all this because their production value is a little high. They rent helicopters and things like that. But But one of my biggest complaints with them is that they're out there in the desert and they're sky watching, but they're real secretive about where their location is. And when some of the people on Metabunk got a hold of their information, were able to geolocate where they were shooting from. I think I understand why. It's because they're in the middle of like a U.S. Army testing grounds and then a private weapons testing group grounds. And so they're like right around all these Air Force, Army airfields and things like that, where you might see aerostat balloons and blimps and drones and things like that flying around all the time. And they're filming a bunch of stuff that they claim is UAPs, although that's really the kind of my second complaint with them, is that they went out there to film all these UAPs and they rented 2 helicopters and they've got like a drone out there to shoot B-roll footage, you know, for their TV program, like to show them driving around in the desert in their trucks and stuff. But unfortunately, whenever there's a UAP around, it's always this tiny little speck of dot on the screen because they're shooting it from like a potato camera on an iPhone 2 from the ground. You know, like they didn't even bring a telephoto lens out there to photograph a, you know, UAP. It's like, who goes out in the middle of the desert with a half dozen men and is like, I'm going to go skywatch, and doesn't take a telephoto lens with them, you know? Or
what's the general location? What state are they in?
California. They're on the West Coast. Yeah.
Okay.
So they might be going up towards Nevada to shoot, you know, or you know, out in the desert. They're out in the desert, and they were real tight.
Who are these guys, Manny? Who are they?
Jake Barber, if you guys remember him. Remember the egg UFO, the pilot from the green eggs and ham guy, as I call him. Yeah, he's the face of that organization, but they've got a big group of people that are working. It's called Skywatcher HQ, and they set out to do, you know, like they had some really big promises and people were kind of like really into it. And I got to admit, I was at the beginning, I was kind of into it, even though I wasn't impressed by the, you know, the green egg footage. You know,
well, let me ask our producer, Bill, you got a good lawyer?
Uh-oh.
You got a good lawyer. Somebody appropriated your name.
Ma, I need a lawyer.
Right. They might have, Skywatcher. I mean, you know, a little trademark infringement there, maybe. Who knows? But they did some good stuff. You know, like some of what they did was they classify UAPs into different groups. They've got like 9 different groups of UAP that they said that they filmed. What I don't like is the arrogance of this group, because they claim that they have a dog whistle, as they call it, which is this electromechanical device that emits a certain frequency. And they claim that with 100% certainty, every time they turn this thing on, a UAP will appear, no matter where you're at in the world, no matter what you're doing. And that really just stinks to me. Like that, I'm really sketchy about that. Yeah.
On top of, they already do the CE5 thing, right? They're already claiming to channel these kind of UFOs in. And I got to agree with Manny that I've heard too that they're doing it near a testing range and whatnot. And I think even Danny Sheehan has basically said that like they're knowingly doing that, and like all these crafts are knowingly like it's all a charade. You know what I mean? It's all an act.
Yeah, I think Danny Sheehan said that Jake Barber was a distraction. Was that Sheehan who said that? He said this guy was sent out as a distraction.
I think that was Burchett. I think Burchett said that.
Oh, Burchett, right. Tim Burchett.
Sheehan's basically saying that they're still working for Northrop Grumman, and that this is all a Northrop Grumman op, and the egg that they found was Northrop Grumman egg on Northrop Grumman testing range, right? Which kind of tracks with what you were saying about where this last event was at.
Right.
What about Coulthard now? Do you think he's bought and paid for?
I believe he's corrupt. Yeah, I don't know if it's actually paid for, or if it's just that they're feeding his ego into his desire to be famous again. You know, like kind of like if you go back in his history and look at his Spies and Lords scandal, you'll see a lot of the same tactics that he uses here, which is when he was reporting on the British Parliament conspiracy that ended up being completely false. But he would make the same kind of unfounded and just spurious claims. This is going to shake the world to its core. This is going to change everything. The UK Parliament's going down. The royal family's going down. Everybody's going down. And then he releases his story, and it turns out that it was completely it was a single source story. And then the guy who was his source ended up being sued and found guilty later of lying, basically, of being guilty of not having any evidence.
I think he's the embodiment he's the physical embodiment of Q.
Yeah.
At least to me, it's an unfounded horse shit.
Yeah, and he loves to overhype stuff and then underdeliver. Like, he'll overhype, that something's coming and it's going to be irrefutable evidence, like he did with Jake Barber and the Orb UFO. That was supposed to be irrefutable evidence of a crash retrieval program that was supposed to change everything and end the discussion. And instead we got a story with footage that wasn't even linked to it. Like that green egg footage was from some other event. We still don't even know where that came from. Like somebody could have shot that in their backyard with a piece of steel cable and an egg, and a green light. Like that could have definitely been staged. We don't even know where it came from. Coulthard hasn't been very forthright about that or forthcoming about it. So I agree with you, Mark. I think he's a little sensationalist for me. I think he should go right for like the Weekly World News and come up with the new Bat Boy Lives type articles. He'd be great for that. Be perfect for that. Sell it in the end caps at the aisle in the cash or at the grocery store. Perfect. It'll be right there next to your Snickers and your gums and your latest Ross Coulthard story of secret alien crash retrieval systems and programs. And, people are being killed to cover this up. And, other people are on the stage talking about it every chance they get, anyone who will listen, they'll be on stage talking about it. Like Lou Elizondo is going to be here in Oregon next month at the UFO convention, like in McMinnville. It's crazy. It's crazy. But that's the world we live in right now.
Oh, he is? Are you going to go? That's right near you.
Yeah. I'm actually planning on going down there. Yeah, for sure. I doubt I'll ever. I won't. Last time
take a camera and try and get him like a question on camera or something.
No, I wouldn't approach him like that. No, and I doubt I'd see him there. Like I went down there before. I think it was in 2022. I went down there to see Brian Bender, and I did approach Bender and had a nice conversation with him after his speaking engagement. I talked to him about why he felt he was being misled by these people, and like if he regretted doing the story and things like that he wrote for Politico. And
you got him right in that sweet spot because he kind of backtracked all that. You talked to him right during that. Oh, that's great. That's amazing.
It was like 2 or 3 weeks after he made his tweet about feeling misled about those people, but he had since taken it down. Now, after that, he's gone to work for those same people at like a nonprofit organization, So now he's just hip deep with them because he doesn't care. But so I might go down there. I'm planning on going down there for the event, not necessarily for Elizondo. He's not worth my time, to be honest with you. And if I see him, I would probably just walk up and say hi. I doubt he wants to talk to me, but I would at least say hi to him.
What if he said, "Hey, Manny, let's go to the bar. Let's try and patch things up." Would you do it?
Oh, for sure. I'd have a beer with him and sit down and talk with him. You betcha. I wou't leave the public areas. I would definitely not walk down an alley with him. Like I wouldn't want to run into some of his brute squad at the end of the alley, but I would for sure go to the bar and have a drink with the guy, like and talk with him. Absolutely. It'd be an interesting conversation, Yeah, but that's kind of where we're at now. Like we've got these UFO celebrity types. Jake Barber is kind of a poster boy for that. Like he just shows up out of nowhere, has got some crazy ass story that doesn't match any of his documentation, like his military background and stuff. Claims he was a secret what do you call it, combat controller for 10 years in the Air Force, but his DD-214 shows that he was a mechanic for like 4 years, and that's it. It's really weird, all this,
and the infrastructure he already has, right, coming out, right? Like already he's got this company, all this backing, this great promo. It's the question I always hear around like UFO Twitter and stuff is like, how long have these people really known each other? And like, how long is this just another arm of a Hal Puthoff endeavor that we're going to find out later down the road? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great point to make, because the production like they have where they go out into the desert with all these camera crews and stuff just doesn't happen overnight. It really kind of reminds me of the To the Stars Academy press release that came out 6 days after Elizondo quit the Pentagon. You just can't logistically plan for something like that in that short amount of time. So they clearly had to have some advanced knowledge and were working together before the fact. And so that I think that there's a little bit of that going on here too. What's Barber's agenda? I don't know. I think he's just shooting for a TV show. I don't think it's anything, I don't necessarily believe he's part of a Northrop Grumman cover-up or anything like that. I'd have to see some pretty good, big evidence to get me to believe that.
Well, the big question is there a Scientology link into it?
Well, that's the other thing. Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Like Red said, you might go 2 steps removed from Skywatcher and find the same old people.
Well, I'll say this on that front. There's a few little interesting data points about that. I don't know if you guys remember, right when the X special came out with Barber, Ross Coulthard did a live Q&A about that special, right? About the very one. And it was the first time he had ever said Scientology knows a lot more about all this stuff than they're letting on. So you got to think it was after he's hanging around these dudes, and then on the Q&A of the special talking about these dudes, he says that. There's another thing, I'm friends with a few former Scientologists, and one of them was telling me that some of the language being used kind of reminded them of some Scientology language. Well, like psionic, yeah, but kind of the way they were describing the state you have to be in when you are channeling these things, basically, the person said reminded them a lot of what they say about the state of clear. Like, you're not hungry, you're not horny, you're not happy, you're not sad. So I don't know, maybe, maybe not. I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't know. I'm trying to not be so I'm trying to not be such a hater. 'Cause it feels like I'm always like a hater in this field. Like, I'm trying to
Yeah,
just
you
give them
come
like
off kind of as a cynical douche sometimes, right?
yeah, I'm like, so I'm just trying to let them do their thing, you know, like I'm trying to, you know, it's still kind of early. We'll give them a year, you know. I don't know.
Have you ever considered that some of these guys are like the Stolen Valor guys, just trying to get attention?
Well, that's
Building
even
up a
with
bunch of
Jake Barber,
bullshit.
right? Wasn't there
Well,
an
Jake
issue
Barber
with
saying that he did all these things. He was a
he was in the
consul.
liberation of Kuwait, right? And he wasn't really for there. That's already kind of, you know, and some of the
Yeah.
veterans in the community have kind of honed in on that. So, like, where can you go from there, right? If you come out the gate with something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. Red, as you're aware, you know, we have a mutual acquaintance, a guy named Local 556, who is ex-military, he's a combat vet. You know, he did work as a contractor in combat zones as well, and has done a lot of that type of work, you know, both for the government and as a contractor. And he did a really nice video where he actually just kind of tears apart Elizondo's story and Jake Barber's story. You know, from one combat vet to another, he's like, this is why these guys' story doesn't make any sense, and I don't believe a word of it, is basically what it was. And he just went through the data points, point after point after point after point, about why Elizondo was never in a combat war zone, why, you know, as an information officer, he wouldn't have been outside the wire, you know, putting himself into a position where he needed to be rescued from General Mattis. And that story where Tom DeLonge tells that Elizondo told him about Mattis rescuing him from a firefight. And then the same thing with Jake Barber about how his special forces, if he was really doing the things that he said he was doing, he wouldn't have the cover job that he said he did, and he wouldn't have worked the job that he did. That basically all indications were that he just made it up. And is it really stolen valor? Is it borrowed valor? I don't know. That's kind of, I leave that for the vets to determine, because it's kind of a touchy subject, you know. But there is some element of that when you're embellishing your accolades in the military, and you're saying that you were in a war zone that you weren't in, when you're saying that you did things that you didn't do, that you were special forces when you weren't. At some point, you got to say, yeah, I mean, it is
stolen valor, period.
Right. I mean, it's not like a civilian putting on a suit and who's never been in the military and claiming that they did those things, though. You know, like there's a little bit of a difference, because Barber did serve.
Well, you get a lot of military vets who do that too. They'll make up things that they didn't do, and they need to be called on it. They got to be called out.
Now, in full disclosure, Gary, let's be clear. You and I are both veterans. It's different if you're standing in front of an audience saying this crap. But if you're in a bar with your buddies and you guys are telling war stories, that's a different thing.
That's bullshit time. It's time to bullshit.
Right. And, you know, I had a buddy who came back from Iraq who was the same way. Like, he did everything when he was there, according to him. When we were sitting in the bar, you know, he was just like, you know, according to him, he probably captured Saddam himself, you know, like.
Yeah, Saddam Hussein. Yeah, I smoked that guy.
Yeah, you know, I was there. Bin Laden got him too. That whole deck of cards, I went through the top 12 one at a time, you know. And then we go out to eat with like a friend of his from the military, and I asked him, I was like, is this guy, like, is any of what he says really? He's like, no, like 5% of what he said. Like, he was there, sure, but did he do all that? No, no. Like, he was a cook or something. You know, he was a mechanic. He was running a a piece of artillery way back where he wasn't. You know, wasn't even forward observation or anything. You know, like, yeah. So that's out there. You know, and we get that, but you know, it kind of sucks that the field that we're in, people can just come out and say whatever they want. A perfect example of that was just this morning. A woman put a video out on TikTok where she's sitting there in fatigues. It says U.S. Navy on her lapel and got her name, you know, on her uniform. Looks legit, and she's basically repeating everything that Skywatcher has said. She says, we've got this dog whistle. We can summon UAP. It's all true. We have this lexicon of these different types of UAP. She basically said everything that Skywatcher said in her last video. She confirmed and said, yes, the U.S. military is doing all of this. And people were going nuts for it. They're like, see, this is confirmation that Skywatcher is legit. And unfortunately, down in the comments section of her video, somebody was like, this is all bullshit. You're just doing this for clicks and views, right? And she responds with a winky face emoji, smiley face emoji, heart emoji. And it's like, yeah, you know, like, it's all just for clicks and views. And it turned out that she was basically just repeating what she had heard in the Skywatcher thing and getting the clicks and views. So it's the danger of the community we live in. And that's why we say testimony in this field, if it's not backed up by some form of ironclad evidence that you can corroborate the testimony with, testimony's worthless. Because
you need a paper trail.
Something. You got to hang your hat on something at the end of the day that's not a story, because people lie all the time.
Well, journalism, let's face it, journalism is dead. It's been dead. It's been dead for at least 10 years. I'm talking about real journalism, investigative journalism. And today, if it wouldn't have been for Manny, I almost got burned. Okay? That article came from the New York Post, and the first thing I did was ask our producer, who's from New York, is the Post a legitimate paper? Oh, yeah, it's straight mainline New York City paper. Oh, but then they don't do any background, right? Journalism, the journalists aren't doing their job. And I'm glad I asked you, Manny, because I had to come off with egg in my face.
Yeah, and that's honestly, we've had a lot of instances of that same thing happening here recently. Going back, at least a couple of years, there's been a lot of these CIA documents that have come out. And yes, that article wasn't a CIA document, but if you really dig into the original document and look, all it was a CIA officer reporting what they had read in a tabloid magazine and putting it on file. So the actual source was a tabloid newspaper article or magazine, or in some cases, it's not even that. It's just a story they heard in a bar or something, and they reported on it, or a quote unquote concerned citizen called in an anonymous tip, and they reported on it. So just because it was in a CIA document doesn't mean that it was real per se. It just means they reported on it, and they do a lot of that reporting. If they even think that something's remotely interesting, they'll put it in there. There's a lot of crazy stuff that you read in those documents when you start going through them. And I really suggest that people do that they spend some time going through the actual the CIA reading room and looking at the actual documents and look at the source for some of these things. Now, don't necessarily take it all just for granted that it was in a CIA doc. Look at where they're getting this information from. And it is, like I said, it's people in the public. It's somebody, so-and-so's neighbor said this, so-and-so recorded this on a phone call with somebody else. So-and-so reports that somebody else told them this in a bar. It's just that. It's that silly. Some of it shouldn't even be entertained, but they still put it in a file somewhere. So it ends up in a document, and then it gets released and disclosed with a bunch of other stuff 60 years later, and people think it's real. It's just crazy.
Well, I shared the link in the private chat. This is the Red Panda post from earlier about it's a video about the National Enquirer being.
Oh yeah, great. I was about to bring that up. Perfect. Cool. I'm glad you saw that.
Yeah. And Bill, if you could bring that link up, it's the Red Panda Koala one with the video. Not the porn one, the other one.
And this is just like a little bit of the other end of what Manny's saying, because that's totally accurate, everything Manny's saying. But there is, I'm not even saying about this case specifically, but there is like the National Enquirer, and I've covered in my videos, like was totally like infiltrated and basically a CIA op that they were using to basically just kind of muddy the waters on a bunch of subjects.
Well,
not
this
just
ties
UFOs.
into what was brought up earlier, that story, Manny, that and Red, that Don was going to talk about at the opening of the show. This falls right in it because it was one of those kind of, I think it was a CIA op article, which is why they have a record of it.
Yeah, and for just like some good examples of that is Jesse Marcel. Before anything, the first thing he came out in was National Enquirer, and Colaris, the first American reporting on Colaris. So whatever you think about Roswell or Colaris, like the first reporting of that was in the National Enquirer too. And that guy Generoso Pope Jr. he literally came from the CIA's. I covered in that video, but the CIA's psychological operations thing, and we had little like outlets like this all, and we probably still do all around the world. Like there's documents about basically a National Enquirer, but just made in India. And that way they just launder real stories, bullshit, or dumb stories, fake stories. And it wasn't just UFO stuff. It was political stuff, right? Like dumb celebrity gossip stuff. But some of the stuff in there was
What about
real.
Bad Face Boy? Was that fake by the CIA?
I don't remember that one.
Bat Boy lives, man. He's real. He's
Bat Boy
real.
lives. You're goddamn right.
But that was the Weekly World News, and they're a step above the National Enquirer.
Yeah, they're a step above, man.
Yeah, now you guys are going to tell me Wonder Woman's not real next, aren't you?
Yep, and Hillary Clinton had a lizard baby.
And even today, right, in the UFO field, I'm not saying that these people are like National Enquirer, but I would consider Liberation Times and the Debrief kind of like intelligence outlets, media outlets. So it's just kind of like that. There's always these weird little like media outlets where if people want, they can get certain messages out,
And remarkably easy too, like because Liberation Times is just Chris Sharp. Like there's nobody else there. There's no lawyers. There's
It's
no
so easy
editors.
now.
Yeah, all you would have to do is bamboozle one guy and promise him insider information, which is exactly what's happened. And then you basically control Liberation Times, making them a propaganda outlet, not a news source.
And
And
I
to be
mean, the thing we
perfect,
talk about, man, he's like the whole field is basically that these days, right? All the podcasts, how
right?
many of them are plopped up and they toe the line so they don't get any of that weirdo treatment, So
Yep.
yeah, Matt Ford,
Well,
you know what I mean?
You guys are aware that right now, except for private individual guys, women doing their podcasts, like from their website or something, KGRA is it. UnX went Tango Uniform, and a lot of formerly big podcast consortiums like KGRA have gone under the wire. So we're kind of right now, if I may be so bold, we're the last giant currently standing. Were you all aware of that?
No, but I remember like your producer was saying that Lee reviews or unidentified celebrity review and stuff used to be on KGRA. I know a fair amount of shows over the years I've seen come through the KGRA thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing I've noticed is that now you guys probably saw the female fencer who refused to compete against the guy, right? So I look at that as a social thing, and I would never want to really have to put that kind of responsibility on students and kids and stuff to have to like I've done whatever it is I'm doing for 15 years, and yet I've got to step aside because the social aspects are so screwed up right now, right? But the same thing could be said for ufology. So if you were to go to Oregon and see Brett Elders talk about the Billy Meyer case, for Christ's sakes, which he hasn't done in a long, long time because he's been working for Shirley MacLaine for decades now, or George Knapp and Lou. We could take it a step further and ask these people public questions while they're taking their Q&A and stuff and call them out. Granted, you're going to get shouted down, right? But
of course,
we don't have a lot of options here because it's built into ufology that you don't have to show receipts because of the Men in Black, because I'll get killed, because I need a switch, that death switch thing. It's built into the subject that you don't have to. Robert O'Dean with his ponytail was partially true with his background, and then it all just blew up and it's bullshit. But there's no way to prove it one way or the other because of the Men in Black. It's built into the subject. So how do you get past that? How do you get past that? Maybe you have the public in mass just call them out as liars and grifters and just don't stop. That's kind of what these ladies in sports have to do on their own, right? Because public's not going to do it for them.
That kind of happens. I feel like the mainstream is kind of already like the mainstream people who aren't even really following this stuff are already kind of burnt out from the 8 years, right? And I feel like Lou and people like that kind of get called grifter and stuff. I see from people who don't even look like they're into UFOs.
Yeah, but of course they're still out there. And Manny, before this show started, we talked a bit about the new Corbell video, which just fell on deaf ears. He's wolf, 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 and nobody cares. And I got to tell you, I hardly saw any reporting on that footage at all, other than people saying, where's the GPS on this? Where's this? Where's that? There's a whole bunch of stuff missing here, and you can't tell us where this came from. Oh, well, it came from here. No, not verbally. Prove it to us. And they can't.
Right. Two things there. So the only mainstream reporting that I saw on it was two what I call compromised sources that are very sympathetic to Corbell in that they've done either programs and specials with them in the past, like Harvey Levin at TMZ did the whole TMZ investigates UFO thing in which Corbell was a star, and then Gotti Schwartz at NBC, and Gotti Schwartz is very connected to them too. He's reported on them and been very sympathetic to them in the past. So it was interesting that everybody else kind of gave that his whole Tic Tac thing a pass, because he was just trying to ride on the coattails of Skywatcher.
He totally was, right? He released it the day after their thing, and you got to think he's had it since it came out, 2023 or something, so probably a while. Yeah, he totally did that.
Yeah, he waited till he was trying to steal some of their thunder and ride on their coattails. So, but the problem with that footage is I've watched it and I was just like, if you go look at some of the news articles, there were some, I think like some of the UK tabloids, and they are tabloid rags, little red top ones, Daily Fail is what I call one of them. They reported on it. But they're like, they said, oh, 4 Tic Tacs fly up and out of the ocean and take off at a breakneck pace or physics defying movement. You watch the video.
Where?
None of that's in there. And then you go and you listen to or watch the interview with Gotti Schwartz, and here's Jeremy Corbell doing his best to sell that, to cry wolf, and say, yes, this is in there. This absolutely happened. And this is documented in the testimony from the interview. And you're like, really? So all this really, once again, you've got a video of some very prosaic, mundane looking footage of just a little blurry blob somewhere doing nothing. And then they're claiming that before they turn the camera on, all this crazy shit happened. But none of that's documented. None of that's on film. None of it's on radar. Where's the radar tracking? Where's the data? If you had a whole squadron of people saying that they saw it with the naked eye, I might begin to start to believe, but then I'd say, why didn't one of you idiots pull out a cell phone? Y'all got them in your pocket. That's how we got the 2004 Nimitz footage. Like somebody had to leak that off the boat. Like y'all got cell phones. Why isn't somebody taking a photo of this?
Yeah, they leaked that off the Nimitz, but they haven't leaked the information that was described before the incident, where they saw an armada of these Tic Tacs in the air.
Right, or the video footage of Fravor where he claims that the thing was pacing him and doing all these weird things and jumping up and down and different altitudes and flying around and making popcorn shoot out of its butt, like all the crazy stuff that they say happened that you'd never ever see. It's always the same thing with these people. And that's just like Mark was saying, Wolf has been cried so many times that you just can't I don't even raise my eyebrows anymore. I'm just like, I've been edged by these guys to the point where my blue balls are black, like I'm not taking them to the prom anymore because they never, ever put out ever.
Also,
have we all become cynical douches? Is that what's happening?
I guess.
Also, when they released it, and I watched, I think most of the stuff that was released on the new one, when Meta Debunker looked at some of the other stuff and they proved that it was camera movement, not dot. In this one, it flies up from the left and goes to the center, right? Which would be a very cool thing to do. But what they don't explain, what my assumption is that that's camera movement. Again, they lock onto it, but it looks like it's stopping there and going hi, and then it moves up. But they never explain any of that stuff to the normal public.
This is something that Mark D'Antoni and I have talked about, which is you've got movement of the camera, possibly of the object, and because of the movement of the camera or the vehicle with the camera, it makes the ground look like it's moving really fast, the object, when in fact it may be just floating.
Right.
Really?
Yeah, it's parallax motion. So you've got like a drone that's got a camera that's on a gimbal. View. So the camera's moving on the drone, but it's also moving within the gimbal itself too. So it's spinning around at different angles, trying to track onto something. And that's how they can get a stable lock on something. And then it looks like the ground is whizzing by behind it. Like you said, when the object
it's actually your own movement that's doing it.
Correct. It's just like when you're in a car.
It's interesting that these a-holes, and we know why, but they can't take the time to bring along the people who are somewhat interested, right? Because they know that if you start, here's a quick one, okay? I know I've gone deep on this stuff, but it's this flat earth horse shit, right? So I'm watching this thing today, and the guy shows the sun and the earth and then the moon around the earth. And he zooms in on the moon and he says, here's why it's a flat earth and not around, because when the moon goes around the earth, when it goes in front of the earth, it has to speed up so the earth doesn't hit it and then slow down on the other side. And I'm watching this. Oh my God. These are the people that some people are arguing with.
There's no such thing as physics with these guys.
It's like, so if I'm in a subway and I jump up in the air, how come I'm not being flung to the back of the subway car?
Right?
I'll give Corbell some credit though. I think over the year, like he's positioned himself, I think with Rogan and stuff, to be like a depository for some of this stuff. Like I think that USS Zumwalt footage, some of that stuff is interesting. But yeah, it would be great if we had like obviously testimony from the people there or something. But I'm curious, what do you guys think? Because I always, whenever any of this stuff comes out, I always think about the that kid who was in the military, and in Discord he leaked some stuff about the Ukraine, and then like immediately he was locked up for like 20 plus years. And this is actually something you'll find this funny, Manny. This is one time where Stephen Greenstreet and Ashton were in agreement of like, how does Corbell is able to release all this stuff, right, in light of like people who actually leak classified information. There's some people from the UAP task force who have said that like, yeah, people are curious to find out who his leakers are and whatnot, and there's almost this like wink wink nudge nudge, he can't tell them. But I don't know, what do you guys think about that dynamic, that he's just kind of
let me tell you a little
drops?
something about intelligence and what happens with unsanctioned disclosure. Are all you guys aware that there was a young woman in the UFO field about 25 years ago by the name of Simone Mendez? Does that name ring a bell with anybody?
I think that does ring a bell. I think so.
Yeah, not with me.
Okay. Simone Mendez had been a young woman in the Chicago area, went into the United States Air Force. And apparently she was pretty sharp. She ended up involved in radio intercept, intelligence collections, that type of thing. And back in the 80s, now, before we go any further, let me mention the NSA, National Security Agency. Now, Manny, Red Panda, do you know what NSA basically does?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, they're the big ear, right? Anything electronic, anything, cell phones, walkie-talkies, CB radio, ham radio, your telephone call, etc. That stuff is all collected. Now, that doesn't mean immediately that it's looked at or examined, but it's collected. And they are building a brand new facility, I believe down in Utah, where all this stuff is being stored. Okay. Now, along with that intelligence gathering ability is also, they've got tripwires for words, certain words that they look for. Like, for example, bomb. Bingo, red flag goes up. Nuclear bomb, even bigger, red flag goes up. And they check that to see what the hell this is all about. Well, they also point their antennas out into space. And Simone Mendoza was in there one day when apparently, according to, and I did a lot of digging into this story back in the day because we ran it in UFO magazine. They apparently picked up a number of unknown, apparently intelligently controlled craft coming in from into the solar system. And boy, I'll tell you what, all the bells and the whistles started ringing and whistling and carrying on. And they basically figured out these were apparently UFOs. They were extraterrestrial craft of some kind. Well, all this now, remember, 80s, right? Not like today, not with all the highfalutin computer stuff we got today. The printers started spewing this stuff out, all kinds of stuff, trajectory. They figured out where these things were going. Some of them were coming toward Earth. And Simone, who was a young woman at the time, got so excited, she grabbed a piece of carbon paper from some of those printouts and snuck it out. She took it to show a friend of hers. Apparently, they had a UFO interest. And the next thing you know, she was surrounded and tackled by the FBI. They brought her back in. They were going to charge her with espionage. It got really, really freaky. So if they're serious, and this is not something that was sanctioned somewhere, trust me when I tell you, they jump on this right from the get-go.
And that's got to make you wonder, with all this supposed stuff coming out, these whistleblowers, it just feels like 90% of this is bullshit somehow because they're not being quashed by the NSA or the FBI.
Right, and not being prosecuted. Like to further Red's point, we had the young kid who leaked some stuff on Discord from the Air Force. He's in jail immediately. Reality Winner, she released a document about the whatever the Russian Trump stuff, and she goes to prison for 4 years. All these other people are going to prison and getting arrested for doing even the slightest bit of whistleblowing, and yet for some reason you've got Elizondo and Chris Mellon who can leak supposedly classified UAP footage, and they get nothing. They get nothing.
Well, yeah, and you also hear stuff like regarding Grush when he's answering his questions.
Mm-hmm.
He was approved to talk about certain things, but not other things.
Yeah, how about they get a lot of them have their security clearances and stuff still too, right?
Yeah,
so what does that say?
Anybody who still has a security clearance or works for the federal government that is called a whistleblower or something else, immediately the red flag goes up for me. So
I understand POTUS has been trimming that somewhat.
Yeah, a bunch of clearances have been yanked, but not the right ones, unfortunately.
Let's not forget about that guy who took the photo, I think, of inside of the sub to send his son, and he got a whole bunch of trouble for one photo of nothing in particular.
But it was still classified information inside of a nuclear submarine.
Right,
and that's,
right.
So that's what we're learning, though, is that a lot of this UAP information that's out there on these supposedly classified networks is not actually classified data. And a lot of it, if you look at the investigation into the Go Fast, Flare, and Gimbal videos that Mellon and Elizondo took out of the Pentagon, those pieces of footage were never classified. They were sensitive. They were in a classified network, but they themselves, the footage was not actually classified. And that's probably how they get away with a lot of this. Now, I want you to couple that, though, with the fact that when you push these jokers for answers on this stuff, they're like, I can't reveal that. I can't reveal that.
Well,
that is a bullshit answer.
It's built in.
Right. Yep. It's 100% bullshit cop-out for them to snowball you and then evade any sort of real criticism. They can talk about all this stuff. That's why it can be in their books. That's why DOPSAR approves it, because it's either unclassified or it's fiction and made up. Either way, they can talk about it.
That's why they won't talk to me.
100%.
Well, that's exactly why they won't, because they know you'll push. And that's why they go to people like Joe Rogan and Sean Ryan. I love both those guys. I really do. But they don't push back at all with these UFO guys.
That's the number one thing if you want to keep access is you can't push back. If you push back in the slightest bit, you'll never talk to them again. They'll ghost you.
I don't think Joe is interested. He's today's Art Bell. He just wants to have cool stories, and he does a good job, going back and forth. I can't bang on the guy too much, but if you're
he has been kind of sketched out though about this disclosure group. It seems over the years it feels like he's getting impatient or thinks he's
getting a little skeptical of it. It's like they keep saying that something's going to happen, and it almost sounds like what does it remind me of? Climate change, I think it was that everything gets stretched out by years, and then when that year comes by, nothing happens.
Yeah, all the prophets of doom, all of them, and I think Joe's a little bit more. I think, like you're saying, he's kind of. I think he's a little skeptical now because he's been sold the story.
Well, he's been talking to some legit guys too.
Oh yeah, like Greer, real legit guys.
Like I just forgot his name, Don, the guy that did the archaeological stuff.
Graham Hancock.
Oh yeah, he had Billy Carson on too.
Graham Hancock.
Graham Hancock. He'll get some legit physicists that come in and pretty much bang the other physicists who've been on his show right in the ass.
Michio Kaku.
Yeah, Michio Kaku.
In
I used to admire that guy so much, and now I just
that's a great example of having some people go against this stuff. Now, I'm not going to get these names right, but the Red Panda talked about the black guy who got his ass handed to him by that religious cat.
Yeah, Billy Carson. Yeah.
Oh my God, that guy, so smart, and he just handed his ass to him. You haven't seen much of him on the wider net, right? He kind of pulled way back. Why? Because this smart cat who I told Don about, who I wanted to get on Don's show, but it's horribly hard to get on because he's so busy. He just handed him his lunch. It was beautiful. But it takes guys like that, not a Rogan who's just interested. That's not going to do anything. You need guys like, and I forget his name, but that religious cat who knows what he's talking about and brought the receipts. And the black guy goes to his house at 2 a.m. and says, "You better not post that, or I'm going to sue you."
Yeah, that was a crazy saga, man. He was live streaming and like crying and saying, "I'm going to sue you." It was crazy to watch.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah, it was crazy. And that's what we need more of. Now, you two do a lot of this stuff, but I think you'll agree with me. The religious cat knows his shit, man. And he just routinely, maturely, and clearly ripped him to shreds. It was beautiful. Beautiful. And we need more of that.
Yeah, and I will point out that Eric Weinstein is the physicist that blew my mind. He came on Rogan and just basically dogged all the other popular physicists and explained where their theories fall apart. That there is no way to test string theory, and so why are we still using it? String theory can't be tested. You can't test any of its foundation. So and so he goes into something else that can be tested, but modern physicists don't want to move in that direction because there's one form of a demigod within the physicist community who orders that you're not allowed to go outside of string theory.
Right. Oh, that guy's name who gave the guys lunch is Wesley Huff.
Wesley Huff.
Amazing. Young guy, has it all going on. He knows how to keep his ducks in a row. Amazing. And I just loved it. He brought that guy down to where he basically walked off the show and started bitching and moaning and crying. It's great. Excellent.
Yeah, I just pulled up the entire 3-hour video of that to share with you guys.
And it's the way he did it. It wasn't like nanner. It was nothing like that. It was like, well, wait a minute. So what about this? Or what about that? Oh, you mean you talk about that? I got it in my book right back here. And he takes the book down and he says, yeah, it's right here. It doesn't say that.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Here you go. I put it in the chat for you guys if you want to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, it's well worth a watch, guys. It's a long one. I had to watch it in 3 times, but it's well worth the watch.
It's over 3 hours, dude.
Yeah.
After 50, that's like 2 pee breaks.
Yes. It was glorious. It was.
I love it, Gary. You always bring it down to the nubbins. There it is.
It does. Hey, man, everything comes down to the nubbins. Everything.
So it would be interesting to have Huff go up and have a nice conversation with what's the black guy who got into the gender stuff. What's it matter to you? The physicist, the black guy. Who's turned into
Neil deGrasse Tyson?
He's such an idiot.
No, I'm just saying it would be great to have Huff go against him and talk about.
Oh, absolutely.
He's
it would be glorious. I don't think he would, though. I don't think he would.
Even what's his name? Bill Maher tore him apart, and Bill Maher's a lefty, and he tore him apart. And that guy is nothing more than a mouthpiece for physics, and he's not very good. He's never done a day's worth of research in his life. All he does is echo what other people have done, all their research. He's just terrible. I can't stand the guy.
Yeah, well,
thank you for sharing, Gary.
Well, it's what I do. That and talk about nubbins.
So between 3 weeks ago and the newest Corbell thing, has anything else broke?
Let's see. There was the Age of Disclosure, Dan Farrah's film debuted at
Which
South by
still
Southwest.
isn't out anywhere, right? It's like
Nope.
we're 3 weeks out from that, and it's not on a streaming service anywhere.
No, and
Kinda weird.
I don't think it will be. From what I understand, they were trying to arrange a distribution deal, so that will take some time. I can tell you now that process of delivering a film to a distributor and getting it to go live can take anywhere from 2 to 3 months easy.
Oh, easy.
If you don't, if you don't have all your ducks in a row, and it all depends on who you're delivering for, because they all have different package. Like if you're delivering to a movie theater, you need a DCP, a digital cinema package, which is different than delivering to Tubi, which is different than delivering to Netflix, which is different than delivering to Amazon. Like it's all different. So, and there are some post houses that handle that type of stuff where you just give them the highest resolution and quality possible, and then they kind of put together all the different packages for you. So it all depends on what they're doing and where they're going with it. And if I do have, I know someone who was down at South by Southwest, and I told him, I was like, hey, if you get a chance, go over and screen the movie. Here's where it's playing. Here's the 2 dates it's playing. And they got to go see it. So they went to go watch it, and they said, they were impressed. They said, it's a good movie. And I said, I understand the quality is great, but we need to talk about the not the production quality, but we need to talk about the content.
Exactly.
Maybe we can cover that after the break. It looks like we're getting ready to go on break here real quick.
Yeah, we need to go on a break.
Don, you're muted.
You're muted.
We are right at the break time. I'm sorry. I thought I was not muted,
Nice.
but I was. Hey, even professionals screw up. So anyway, we'll be back after these words. Stick around.
From Iraq and Afghanistan, our brave warriors are coming home, wounded. Some with wounds you can see, some with wounds you can't see. Wounded Warrior Project was created to support our men and women coming off the battlefield. Please help carry these warriors the rest of the way home. Get involved at woundedwarriorproject.org.
MUFON is the voice of thousands of like-minded people who want to see change. We speak up against UFO secrecy. We engage governments and agencies around the world on the topic. We share information with the public through our journal, website, newsletter, social media, and even our own TV channel. When you join MUFON, you add your voice to the cause. Few things are more important in our time than understanding the UFO question. Join MUFON. Find your friends.
I made sure my microphone was on. I got a little red light on the base of it, and I should watch that all the time, but sometimes I don't. But I'm coming through now, right? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Can you hear me now, Gerry? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, I tuned you out, Don.
Okay, now I said several years back when Unidentified was still running on the History Channel, that was with the To the Stars Academy. Okay. I said then that one thing I noticed about that was the constant drumbeat of saying, and they stress this every episode, that there could be a potential national security threat to all this. Gee, no kidding. But if that was not it, then this could be one of the greatest dog and pony shows that the Pentagon ever put out. Now, there is, in my mind, absolutely no doubt that the phenomenon is real. I have no more of a clue what's behind it than anybody sitting here. But I came down to the conclusion there were only three possibilities of what might explain this. Number one, obviously, the extraterrestrial explanation. Number two, and this is even actually, I find it more terrifying than ET, interdimensional. Or another possibility could be the remnants of an ancient Earth advanced civilization that boogied on out about the time of the Younger Dryas event when the ice caps all melted and later came back, but decided for whatever reason to go underground. Now, there have been certainly a lot of stories coming from people over the decades about encountering apparently sentient beings beneath the earth. Where do you guys come down on any of that? Because I don't for a second believe that there's nothing to this.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's nothing to it. I think there's something to it, but I don't think there's any one correct answer either. I think it could be a combination of all the things or none of those things too, and something that we can't even possibly wrap our head around. Could be spiritual, could be extraterrestrial, could be interdimensional, could be all of them. Like there's definitely a lot more going on to the reality as we know it than we can see and wrap our hands around and touch. Wi-Fi radio transmissions, things like that. We can't see that, but they exist. Why couldn't there be a consciousness out there that's some sort of higher being or something, or ancient intelligence too. What I do know is that the universe, from what we can see of it, is a very, very, very large place, and there are tons and tons of planets out there that can sustain life as we know it. It'd be arrogant and foolish for us to assume that we're the only intelligent life form in this huge, huge space, So I think that there's something more out there. Are they coming here with impunity and flying through our airspace and buzzing around our nukes? I don't necessarily think that's true. I think if that were the case, we would know it and we would see it. It wouldn't be a potential threat. We would know what a threat is because there would be some clear-cut evidence of that. And that kind of goes to the people who are, Don, like you were saying, we're making the national security threat claims. You got to look at who those people are. They're former intelligence community people. And to those people, if there's even a 0.01% chance that something is a threat, you treat it as if it's a threat, as if there's a foal that it's a threat. Yep. That's how they operate. And you drop a nuke on an anthill, that's how they operate. So when I hear, there was a part where it was shortly after Tom DeLonge parted ways with Elizondo and Mellon, they left TTSA. And that's when these guys kind of partnered up with Jeremy Corbell, started to kind of take that public speaking phase for these people. There was a time there where for like a year, Corbell and Elizondo were on every single freaking news channel that would have them. And they were like, oh, these things are a threat. They're flying with impunity through our airspace. They're buzzing our nuclear facilities. They're definitely a national security threat. That was the words. Like they were just throwing it in our face. Threat, 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 threat. And what I think that they were doing there was trying to manipulate Congress. They were trying to manipulate the Congress people and saying, there's a threat here, you have to address it. That's the number one way to get some kind of money thrown at a program or to get some kind of action going, is to claim that there's a threat that's not being addressed. You're going to scare everyone from the DOD to the Pentagon to the Congress people to want to act on it and get on board. But as we see now, I mean, like I said, I just don't think that there is a threat there. I don't think a jellyfish UFO caught on film is a threat to anything. I mean, if it was, we'd see it. We'd see it fly down out of the video, crash into a ship and explode, or fly over a bunch of people and the people disappear in a poof of smoke. Okay, then I'm going to think there's a threat. But just something being there that I can't explain, my mind doesn't inherently go to that's a threat because I can't explain it. To me, the unknown is just that, unknown. And I'm not going to directly equate it to a threat because I'm not an intelligence guy. That's what their job is, not mine.
I agree with everything you just said, Manny, with the exception of the nuclear interest. There is a nuclear interest. Now, one of the most telling investigative books ever published on this was from Larry Fawcett and Barry Greenwood, called Clear Intent. And it was strictly from military files. And they showed point by point by point incursions into nuclear weapons areas and what happened. There is an interest. And now, if they're coming here for whatever reason and they have an interest in what's happening here on the planet, what could be more potentially threatening or an apocalypse in the making than an unheralded nuclear war? And look at right now, the thing between Iran and Israel. Iran, for years now, for over 20 years, has been desperately trying to get their hands on an atomic weapon. Does anybody doubt that if they got that, seeing as how unstable and crazy and fanatical those people are, that they might try to use it? That's horrifying.
Well, one has to ask a question as well. Let's say that we have the opportunity to either interdimensionally travel or space travel or whatever. And let's say that we're, 100 million light years away or something, like the Stargate or something, right? Does it really matter to us that Kurt Russell's going to blow up the Stargate 100 million miles away on a planet that we have no interest in? Does it really matter to us? So if they're coming here and they're showing interest in how we're treating each other and all that, I would have to ask, why are they showing interest in us that we may or may not blow ourselves up? Because they certainly didn't do it to Mars. Because if you believe what Dr. Brandenburg says about Mars, that got blown up and there it sits, right? I mean, there's a lot of assumptions that I can't fill in here because I'm an idiot. But if that happened, it's just sitting there now. It's just sitting there. No worse for wear as far as we're concerned, because that's how we've always seen it, right? So it's like, well, gee, do they really give a shit about us? Really? I mean, if we're going to kill ourselves, I don't know, because I don't think we'd give a shit about them. Not really. Unless there was some sort of an idea that they could come after us. Well, if they have that kind of technology, they ain't worried about that from us, right? They're not worried about that because they're way above us in technology, and they could probably just snuff us out. So since we can't do that to them, why are they so interested in us? I have no answers there.
What would happen to the Earth? Okay, let's say all humanity, for the most part, was destroyed in a nuclear exchange.
Like on Mars.
Yeah. Okay, what if they had, for whatever reason, an inordinate interest in the planet itself? the planet would be really damaged.
It would. I wonder why we're not seeing that, like when Manny says, until they would come here and like crash into a ship or something like that. I can't think of this right now. Don has a better background on this, but do we have any good examples of them interacting with us in such a way to cause that kind of damage? Inexplicable damage, like, holy shit, we don't know where this came from, but look what happened. And I don't mean asteroids or anything like that. I mean some sort of extraterrestrial, interdimensional thing that happened on Earth that we can point to say, wow.
Well, maybe we do, maybe not. As you guys all know, I was very close friends with Zecharia Sitchin, the guy that did the groundbreaking work on Sumeria. And we also know that there are several places on the planet, even now, these many thousands of years later, that show evidence of what could only be a nuclear strike. Mm-hmm. Now, according to Sitchin, all right, these beings that came down, the Anunnaki, all right, were basically a dysfunctional family. My God, they made Game of Thrones look like they all got together for everybody's birthday. All right. And there were power struggles between the various gods. Okay. They weren't really gods, but the various power elite. And it got into a match where they started slinging nukes around. Now, Sitchin, okay, pinpointed, and one of the books that he did this in was his book, Genesis Revisited, where these alleged strikes took place. And we're talking about a long time ago, before the Ice Age, okay, collapsed. So I don't know. Maybe there are. Now, in India, going all the way back to when I was in school, we had a literary book club, and I used to periodically order books through it. And one of my favorite authors at that time was Frank Edwards, okay, who wrote a lot of books about weird, strange things, everything from horses that could count to UFOs, okay? And as a kid, I just dug the hell out of that. And in that book, they talked about this area in India where the British, during the British Raj, were building a railway until they got to this area with inordinate, even then, amounts of radiation that seemed to show there had been a nuclear event there. So, yeah, if you look around, you can find some of these things.
Well, you can find maybe inexplicable things and we have no reasoning behind it. So, okay, that's fine. I don't know. It just seems like Mars is an interesting sort of analogy there. If Mars was similar to Earth and then some horse shit went down on Mars, they weren't interested in Mars enough to stop it. They were like, well, okay.
No, but Brandenburg did groundbreaking work.
Oh, I'm not saying that he
No,
didn't.
but what I'm saying, he proved beyond a doubt, at least in my mind, that there was a hydrogen bomb holocaust there when he discovered the xenon 129.
Right,
okay?
right.
Now, that stuff can only come from two places that we're aware of. Number one, a hydrogen warhead. Number two, a star that goes supernova. Now, if it had been a star, Earth would have been impacted.
Right.
Too. Okay.
Right.
We have no evidence of that. We do have a number of extinctions that have never been successfully explained, but not the physical damage that a supernova would have conducted. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. It is interesting though that you would assume that they would care just similarly to a similar planet very close to us, that they would want to maybe interject there or whatever, or possibly, hey, look, if you want to go sci-fi, they're the ones that caused it and they don't want it to happen to the second one. I don't know. It just seems as though if they have a vested interest in this, they'd be a little bit more involved.
Well, as you know, Brandenburg theorized and still does that there was some type of sentient civilization on Mars at the time they were extinguished.
Right.
Not advanced.
Right.
He theorized they may have been the level of the Bronze Age, for example.
Right.
Okay.
Which means that there were smarter people out there, aliens out there, who were doing whatever they were doing. And
now I asked him, I said, well, if that would turn out to be true, John, why the hell would anybody want to obliterate those people? You know what he said?
Nope.
Well, his bottom line is he thinks at this point, this is the last thing he said to me, that what they encountered was an AI-powered ship, a robotic ship, not flown by organic beings, but an AI ship out on an exploratory mission that basically he theorizes that they saw sentient life in any form as a potential threat down the road, and as a result, they nuked them. Now,
so they nuked them before they had the wheel. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and if that's true, wouldn't they continue monitoring civilizations to come back should they regrow, as in the case might be here on Earth if that happened?
Well, yeah, you're right, and that's in itself, Manny, scary as hell. Now, at the time that Brandenburg was doing all this research, he theorized that this event happened about 200, maybe 250 million years ago. And at that point, Earth was still pretty much primordial soup, all right? No land animals or anything else. So I don't know. The dinosaurs were 65 million years ago when they were wiped out approximately. And they had only been around for a bit over 100 million, maybe 150 million years. So that would fit into that time frame. There wasn't much else happening here.
Yeah.
I may be off a year or two, but
Yeah, as far as like crazy things that we can't explain, the Tunguska event would be another one to look at, of 1908, I think it was, early 1900s, where there was a huge explosion over Siberian Russia. I think the prevailing theory is it was like an airburst comet or something like that, or an ice comet that exploded in the atmosphere. But if you look at some of the blast patterns on the ground, it's got like a butterfly effect that looks like a nuke went off, and it looks like it was years before we ever had even thought about what nuclear energy was or nuclear explosions were. So, what caused that? Was it a meteorite? I know that over the years, the Russians have sent several expeditions to the area trying to find a meteorite fragment. Haven't been able to find anything. I think Sandia Labs did a recreation where I think the prevailing hypothesis is that it was an ice comet that exploded in the atmosphere on the way down and that it burned up under its own explosion. So there's nothing left. There's no residual pieces to find. It might be
because you got to remember the location is just so remote.
Right.
And they wouldn't even let folks in there generally for a long time. So
yeah, I think it was 30 or 40 years before even the Russians began an expedition to try to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah, but they did send a couple of expeditions to try to find it. They mapped it out real well. Some of they had a plane. I think the first one had a plane with them, so they took some aerial pictures, obviously before satellites and stuff. But the blast patterns of the trees and stuff, and the fact that the dust that was in there covered, circumnavigated the Earth, the entire Earth. That was a huge explosion.
It was. But since it hasn't happened that often, you're kind of doing your tests, and you don't have a lot of history, because when St. Helens went off, that went around the world too.
Yeah, I remember that when I was a kid. Actually, I remember collecting dust here. Yeah, scraping it off of the bumper of my mom's car. In fact, in the basement of her house, in a Gerber baby food bottle, I still have a jar of the dust.
Nice.
Yeah, the ash. Yeah,
that's crazy. I stayed there for a long time because I worked in Seattle after I got out of the Army as a paramedic, and I remember going along the Alaskan highway, and it looked like snow on the sides of the roads. on
the white ash.
Yeah, and it was ash, and it was almost like it would crumble, but when you touched it, it felt rock hard because that stuff had just been sitting there, not cleaned off the road.
But I will say the sunsets for months were beautiful.
Right, because all the debris in the air, right? Maybe not so good on the air quality index.
That's what natural disasters do. They make the horizon look great.
Yeah. I think more recently there was another one over there at Chelyabinsk, that big one, the airburst meteorite that came down that, exploded, and several people were injured. A couple hundred people were injured, if I remember correctly. I don't know that anyone was killed. But when you see the footage and hear that, like, it's amazing. The fact that meteorite came in, though, at such a low angle and was in the atmosphere for so long was really fortunate, because if that thing would have come straight down, it would have been devastating. That city would have been gone. It would make Pripyat near Chernobyl look like a pleasure resort palace. You know what I mean? Like
that is one of the events that I use as analogous to why we should have better footage of whatever we're talking about, because the best film of that came from a taxi, and it shows it come right in, right? And it's like, well, how many of these cameras are out there? Again, I beat this dead horse, billions of cameras, and yet we're able to capture that, which is just unheard of, right? And we're just not seeing a lot of inexplicable videos of other things, but we do have the octopus, so hey, we got that.
The jellyfish UFO.
That is not of this planet.
Actually, it's kind of interesting. Mick West just posted a simulation this morning where somebody had flown up a Mylar balloon. Yep. And they had two different cameras on it. One was like a ground stationary potato cam, like from a cell phone, like everybody filming UFOs with this day. And the other one was like some kind of high powered, like a Nikon P1000 or something like that with a telephoto zoom. Mm-hmm. And so on the one where you could zoom up, you can clearly see it's a Mylar balloon with a fucking string hanging down from the bottom. Right. And then the other one from the ground, by golly, if it doesn't look like a blurry jellyfish from the ground. 100%, looks like a jellyfish with little tentacle legs underneath it swaying in the wind. Right. And to me, that's just a great, I love that somebody took the time to do that experiment, to get two different cameras side by side and say, this is what it looks like when it's blurry and out of focus from the ground. And this is what it looks like when it's close up. Now, tie that into what's going on with Skywatcher. Remember how we were talking earlier about Skywatcher HQ and about how they didn't have any telephoto lenses or anything like that. They basically, in my opinion, were either inept or unprepared or whatever. Now, there's been a professional Hollywood cinematographer who's volunteered to go out with them. He's like, I've got all the equipment you need. He put a picture of his rig up there, and it's a big telephoto camera. He's like, I'm ready to photograph this stuff if you guys will have me. And they finally agreed to have him out there on their next Skywatch. So maybe on the next one, we'll get some clear footage.
Who is that, by the way?
Out there. I want to say Jay Hunter is his name. I'd have to look up on my Twitter feed to make sure. But he volunteered and they took him up on it. They said, sure, we'll have you out there. So we'll see if they actually invite him out there to do this. But that's the kind of stuff we need. We need some real clear-cut footage. If they're going to claim that they can summon a UAP 100% of the time and that these are non-man-made and otherworldly of some kind, let's get some documented evidence of this. Let's not have a blurry little blob where they're like, look, it's a Tic Tac because it's shaped like a I don't know, a propane tank or whatever, like a cylinder, like let's get some real footage out there and let's really talk about what they're actually seeing. And let's get them away from the military training grounds and the weapon training grounds. Let's get them out in the middle of nowhere where we can rule out man-made objects, as a rule, let's get them out somewhere where they can prove that what they're doing is summoning it either with their brains and the CE5 or with this electronic dog whistle that they have, instead of standing next to an airport being like, look, it's a UAP. Why is it flashing red and green lights? I don't know. It's magic. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And bring that same guy who offered to do that out to Skinwalker and say, hey, I'll come out to you guys because that potato footage, I haven't watched that thing since I think series 2 because there was so many contradictions and hypocrisy in that show. I just had to stop. It was like, come on. I'm not forgetting about what you said in the last episode. Come on. Let's get something good going here. Oh, we're firing off rockets and it's hitting something in the air. Is it? Is it really?
Yeah, why wouldn't you fly a drone up there or something, and that was kind of my beef with Skywatcher. They had 2 helicopters that they rented, but they
hear that Billy's got a beef with you.
Yeah. They had 2 helicopters they rented, which are god awful expensive. And
Right.
you know, they didn't fly the helicopter up to investigate one of the UAPs or the drone. And apparently they did. And the helicopter went haywire and they had to land it. But of course, that's from an anecdotal story and none of that's evidenced on tape. None of that's filmed. You know, it's like, come on, man. Like, if you've got all these cameras and stuff out there, film some of this crazy stuff. I'm getting so tired of them being like here's the footage, and it's just completely mundane. And then they have this wild and crazy story that happened when the camera was off. Like, come on, I could do that. I could do that same thing.
At Skinwalker Days, they did the same thing when they had the drone guy come. It wouldn't fly, and instead of the movement of the drone off somewhere else to see when it would fly, like any researcher would do, they gave up, right? And then there was one where they went into some hole up on the mesa and the guy got sick or something like that. They flew drones in a later episode in the same area with no response to the old drone, and they never went back to that hole in the ground to do any research. And it's like, I'm done with this, man. This isn't research.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you brought that up because it just reminds me of a Reddit thread that I read just the other day about a guy who is like a younger family member of the family that owns the property up on the top of the mesa there, just I think it's north of Skinwalker Ranch.
Okay.
That lives there. And he's like, what's going on with this show? They're a bunch of idiots. He's like, I've lived here my whole life. I've never seen anything. He's like, they're more than welcome to come up on our property and film and investigate and do whatever they want. Go ahead. He's like, I've contacted the show people and told them they can come up here and investigate the mesa if they want to. He's like, and they won't respond to me. You know, like, and I'm thinking, why not? Why make all this big old hoopla? And if the family there is going to let you investigate it, why not? You know, and the only answer I have is that they don't want to. You know, they want that mystery. They want that allure. They want to be able to bamboozle us with bullshit to make a good TV show. But
absolutely,
it's good entertainment. It's not good science.
I suppose it's good entertainment. I can't watch that stuff, but
I can't either. But they've got what, 5 years? I think they're going on now, and so that's. You know, I mean, that's, you know, for someone in the industry, I could say that's good. You know, like if you can get a TV show and get 5 seasons, you're not doing bad for yourself if you're the executive producer of that show and you're getting residuals and royalties and you're making money off of each episode. You know, you're probably doing pretty dang good. But they only will renew those contracts if those things sell and people watch them. You know, if people aren't watching it, they're not going to renew it. They'll drop it quicker than an old hat, you know, so good for them. But again, it's not science. And that's something that Brandon Fugel always comes on Twitter and argues when people are like, hey, man, this is great entertainment, but it's not science. And he's like, what do you call it? I've got all this irrefutable evidence. And he tries to act like he's a scientist. I'm like, bro, you're in entertainment. You're not in science. You're not using the scientific method. You have no controls out there. You're not peer reviewing any data. You guys aren't science. And if you were, you wouldn't be on History Channel. You would be writing scientific papers and submitting them to other scientists to recreate your results or to verify your findings. That's a scientific process. It's all about repeatability. It's not about trust me, bro, and anecdotal stories. You know, that's entertainment. Yeah.
Well, nothing says more I don't know anything about science than somebody who doesn't use the method.
Right. Then a real estate guy from Utah who's like, I'm a scientist. And you're like, no, dude, no, you're not. If you were,
Corbell calling himself a journalist.
Right. Why? Because he says he is, you know, I mean, he at least can call himself a filmmaker because he's made a few films, but he's not a journalist. The only reason he called himself a journalist was for the First Amendment protections. Because he was scared that they were going to be coming after him, for leaking information.
I got a question for both Manny and Red. Now, when you guys were on here before, because of the deep dive and research you were doing in some of these leaders, I guess you have to call them, of the disclosure process, are you still receiving, are you both still receiving blowback on that?
I am. Definitely, as of just of yesterday. You know, Red, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, no, definitely it is. But it does kind of feel like, I feel like since we've been shining a spotlight on it, they've like toned down, or at least people like Lou Elizondo aren't as blatant with their, I don't know, I feel like he's gotten the message, but still like some of the system they've set up kind of still, yeah. I mean, I just kind of view it as like a constant thing now.
Yeah, it's never going away. And like Red was saying, Elizondo has tried to distance himself from it publicly. So he's clued these people in that are doing all the harassment in his name. So they all will distance themselves publicly. And before they start harassing people, are like, Lou doesn't know anything about this. He doesn't know anything about this. We're doing this of our own accord, but then they're doing it all to benefit him. So it's really transparent. And then they gaslight you and say like, oh, we're not really doing anything. But then on the same side, these same people, like one of the worst of them has a poster signed by Lou Elizondo where the guy's like, hey, Joe, sorry I couldn't meet you in person, but when I do meet you, the beer and hot dogs are on me. And he signs it Lou Elizondo, you know, and another guy he met at a theme park to go hang out and spend the day with them. You know, so like he's rewarding these people, but then he wants them to gaslight everyone and make it seem like he's not rewarding them, that he has nothing to do with it, so that he has plausible deniability. But then he throws it in our face so that people who are paying attention know that he's full of shit and that he actually does know what's going on. That's just Elizondo for you, though. He loves the drama and he loves the fact that we're sitting here talking about him, you know, like it all feeds his ego. And that's all he's about is his ego, his pathetic little small guy, 5'2" ego, because he's, you know, lame, hasn't seen his wiener since high school. You know, like poor guy.
Come on, Manny, tell us what you really think. Quit pussyfooting around.
I'm not holding back when it comes to that guy. He's a loser, man. He even stole the name of my YouTube channel for his presentation. He calls it Universal Truth, and my YouTube channel is called Area 503, the search for universal truth. And now the last year,
wow.
And now everything he's doing is universal truth. The evidence is clear. We're not alone. I'm like, you fucking hack. You hack. Just like everything in his book, he stole from somebody else. Like every single chapter of his book, you can just go through it and break it down. It all came from other people, other researchers, stories from Hal Puthoff, common ufology trope. Like there's nothing in there that was new where I was like, gee, I haven't heard that before. I wonder if I can research it. There is nothing. Like his book, I just held it and I was like, this is like a primer for people. Like if you've never ever read like The Day After Roswell and you don't know who Colonel Corso is, you might think his book is cool and revelatory. But for people who study this subject, it was a joke. It was just a joke, and he's a joke too. That's what I think.
Well, okay.
Hey, Don, did you ever read the Lou book? Because if you like it, I'm going to ship you a little box of goodies to you and your dogs. I can throw it in that box if you want to take a look at it. I got about halfway through it and I gave up.
I got the book. Okay.
Oh, okay.
I have the book. No, I haven't read it yet. As a matter of fact, funny you should mention that. The other day, my wife came to me and she was holding it. It was in the bookshelf.
Mm.
And she said, have you read this yet? And I said, no, I haven't gotten to it yet. And she said, oh, maybe I'll look at it. I said, well, hey, you know, knock yourself out, sweetheart.
Exactly. If you have nothing left in your life to live for, go ahead.
It's good for a good laugh. Yeah. Mark, did you see or anything in the book that stood out to you that you hadn't heard somewhere else before?
No.
Well, the remote viewing torture thing, right? Nothing that's like really like, that was one thing where it's like, okay, I never heard anyone say this ever. even remote viewers who I talked to are like, I've never heard anyone claim that as like a thing. So I guess there's one.
Yeah.
And we had a little back and forth with Brandenburg about remote viewing, and I talked to Don about this, and I said, much in the same way as the fencing girl can stand up for her own rights type of thing, we don't need NASA or the FBI or the CIA data on remote viewing. You can do it yourself. You don't need any of that. You can do it yourself by finding people who are vetted through you two guys, Don and others, and setting up your own tests for remote viewing and see what happens. And my example was, since they say they're going to go to Fort Knox, and I think we can believe that they're going to tell us what's actually in there, then why not do a remote viewing thing of Fort Knox ahead of time as one test, right? Because then you'll have a verified reveal by Musk, and then you can say, okay, well, what did the remote guys say? And then I wanted to get like the Ark of the Covenant and get a few of those and send them around the country and go as far as say it's in this town on this block. What is it? Right? We don't need their data. And that's just one example of many things that we could do as the citizen journalists, as they say, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was one group that was studying remote viewing that had for the longest time a $1 million reward for anyone who could prove the existence of such a thing. And to my knowledge, as of this date, nobody's ever claimed that reward. So, I mean, make of that what you will. Maybe their test criteria was too stringent. Maybe they needed to, open it up a little bit. But I see people on social media doing the same thing that'll do a daily remote viewing challenge where they place an envelope with a drawing or a picture in it and ask people to remote view what's inside, draw what they think it is, and upload the images and things like that. And people are out there actively trying to test it. So I agree with you, Mark. You don't need to know what the CIA was doing with the stuff back in the 70s. That's really kind of irrelevant to today's conversation. Instead, if you want to prove the existence of this stuff, you should just do, like you said, set up a test and try to have somebody, anybody, and there's no better way to do it now with social media where you can connect people around the world. You can get a hugest test pool in the history of man is right there. It's like Twitter, Facebook, whatever, like you have access to millions, if not billions of people.
And in the same light, we don't need NASA or India or Japan or anybody else to bring a car and a helicopter to Sidonia. We have Musk. Right. And he seems like a guy who would actually do that and say, well, yeah, that sounds like a kick. Between my next birth of my 20th baby, let's do this, right? And and he would throw the things up there and say, okay, let's zoom in on the nostril. Oh, look, it is a nostril. Imagine that. We've got the truth, or at least some part of the truth. We don't need them as much as we used to.
Yeah, that's for sure. And there's people out there, like I said, if we have access, we have everyone on the world looking at something, we can solve a problem real quick. With social media, enough people get online with something, you'd be amazed what people will come up with when you have 100,000 or even 1 million or 5 million or 10 million people all trying to solve a problem. They're going to come up with the answer. Very well.
You've seen what Mick West has done. I don't care if you like the guy or you hate the guy. He has verifiable proof of things that they figured out with his team, like the chandelier. I think it was the one where he figured out what apartment it was in, what window they shot it from, and that it was a reflection. He figured that out with his team. Nobody else did. Verifiable.
Yeah, that's amazing what some of those metabunk people have come up with as a group think when they're all working together. They've got some very, very smart people. And, if you haven't watched the documentary, Don't Fuck with Cats. It's great. It talks about that same thing on the internet where there was a guy who was messing around, like torturing cats online, and a bunch of internet people did the same kind of thing to geolocate. Like one of the things they looked at was like his wall outlets to figure out what country he was in because of the type and style of electrical outlet that was on. It was amazing. And that wasn't even a large group of people, but they were able to geolocate this guy and figure out who he was by little clues like that. And that's what I mean. Like if we as humanity get together and put our minds to something, we can solve any sort of problem, but we got to get past the distractions and the politicization and the polarization and things like that, because when we work together, we can achieve really great things. We can come up with any answers. But
that's not going to happen soon.
No, it doesn't seem to want to happen. It seems like there's too much interest from a lot of people in positions of power and money.
To some extent, it is happening because if you look at the bunk people, they may be a small group, but they're actually coming up with verifiable information. So it's true where, right, Don, you're right. To a greater extent, it's not going to happen because we have a giant newspaper in the East Coast or in the UK who's going to throw this crap out there as distraction. They turned all the soldiers into stone, blah, 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 right? It's like, well, what do we really need to see that? I mean, really? Well, it's entertainment, I suppose, like the shows on TV, but I'm sure you would agree, Don, they're doing a lot of this on purpose. They're sending a lot of this shit out there and floating it on purpose to keep us engaged with the shiny thing.
Well, that was CIA's modus operandi back in the 50s and 60s concerning,
it's the same. It's
concerning the UFO thing. Yeah.
Yeah, look at the candy red button.
Yeah, distraction's a big part of it. And the other part is just Don, like you said earlier, journalism's dead. Like it's all about clicks and views now, and that's all they really care about. It's not about fact checking.
There's activism is all over journalism. I was
Right.
working for magazines in the 90s, and I thought it was great, but there are quite a few progressives, but it was nothing like it is today.
No.
Yeah, when you got people like Leslie Kane who admit that their articles are like 98% fake and were just designed to further a conversation and to further an agenda and an activist, that's a problem. That's a problem.
An idea.
Right.
To further and progressively push forward an idea.
I tried to get her to come on my show. She wouldn't do it.
Oh, did you, Don?
Right.
What'd she tell
you?
I can't. I'm not interested. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
So when we go to the con that you might go to, and you have the same sort of situation, right? You have Brett Elders who's going to talk about the Meyer-Palladian context, right? Do you think that she's going to mention the German guy who went to the same spot and used the same still camera and video camera and used one arm to recreate the most famous clips from him? And he did it like, you can see it on YouTube. Will she ever mention that? Of course she won't.
No.
And George Knapp will be there. Will George Knapp ever answer the question, why didn't I vet Lazar's education like I supposedly vetted other people who were at S4 or 51 who knew the color of the chairs and stuff? All this stuff, right? It's like, move on. So when I called up Brett Elders' husband, Lee, and I asked him about the Meyer case, and he said, we're doing other stuff now. That's an old case, and we've already gone through that, which is total horseshit. And then you find out that him and his wife were in Mexico editing the Mexico footage in the early 90s and releasing that on the VHS 3 sets, which I have, but they never made that public. They never made that public, that the same people who were putting out the Meyer stuff are in Mexico to put out that stuff.
Crazy. Yeah, I don't think they want that publicly known. And no, they don't answer real critical questions. The last time I went to the McMinnville UFO Fest or any one of these speaking engagements, all of the questions had to be submitted beforehand in writing.
Oh, really?
And they would pick and choose which ones they wanted to answer. They wouldn't even hand you a mic. They wouldn't even hand you a mic and let you read your own question. There would be like an assistant there to read it to the panel member. And then
that's different, because when I used to go in the 90s, and then the last one I went to was at the San Diego Zoo for the Dr. Jonathan Reed case. You could ask your questions and they weren't vetted. Of course, they got to the third question and they shut the whole thing down because people started to question their bullshit. But wow, so they basically do what the president, the last one did was, I've got certain people to call on with certain questions.
Yep.
Wow.
Pre-scripted questions. It's like when Elizondo did his live Q&A on YouTube, where he did this allegedly live Q&A, but it was pre-recorded, and they were questions that were submitted to like his publicist beforehand and vetted, and then they picked and choose. And it was funny, all the people that were the questions that he took were all these same people that he claims he doesn't know and doesn't associate with, but are his little attack dogs on social media. It was really crazy. It's like, here's a little reward. Here's a little reward for you for doing my dirty work, but I'm going to publicly deny that I have anything to do with you, but I'm still going to like, what a bunch of crap. But that's specifically one person. That's, other people might be more open. I mean, some of these people might have like an open forum where they hand them a mic and let people ask questions. But for the most part, I haven't seen that.
Let's put it this way. When Wes Huff did his debate with Carson and it was open to anything and it blew up in that guy's face, you're probably going to see more of the vetted questions because nobody wants that to happen. Nobody wants that to happen. Guys, if you haven't watched that, Don, you have to watch that when they were having the back and forth about religion and Christ and all that stuff. He's just like, sir, I need you to bend over.
Yeah, I put the link to it in our private chat.
It's just glorious, Don. I mean, just glorious. And that's an example why it's all going to be shut down. All of it's going to be shut down.
Yeah, and I think that's why Elizondo has avoided doing live debates and live interviews with people that way. So he's so thorough about how he vets people. And if he even gets a whiff that they might ask him a hard question, he trashes them and won't go on there. Like a perfect example was a Canadian couple named Josh and Artemis, where they were supposed to have Elizondo on his show, but then he caught wind like a week before he was supposed to show up that they might ask him some hard questions. And he did this weird attacking thing where he accused them of being like liars and different things. And then first he made up an excuse not to go on the show, scheduling conflict, of course. But then all of a sudden, there's all these weird attacks were coming out against these people from the sides and whatever, and some directly from Elizondo himself, where he accused them of being, not in good faith, and things like that. So they're really, really careful about who they'll go on. I'm surprised that Carson went on with this West Huff guy. He must not have vetted him or thought he could handle him. I can't wait to watch it. I got it queued up now. I'm just waiting to watch it.
Oh my goodness! It's just.
Oh yeah, and the freak out afterwards was crazy from Billy Carson. He had a few live streams up where he was just kind of having a meltdown about it all.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Billy's kind of an interesting guy. Like I know Stephen Cambion had done some research into him, and at one point he had some kind of issue where I think Billy tried to like threaten with a lawsuit or something like that. It was interesting. I don't want to speak too much on Stephen's behalf, but he'd be a good one to get on and talk about Billy Carson one of these days. I bet he's got some opinions that would make you laugh and some inside information. But yeah, I can't wait to watch that now. And Billy Carson, if he's the one who does the Forbidden Disclosure Conference, right?
Yes.
With Jimmy Church, is he a part of that too?
I think he might be.
Yeah. Good old Jimmy Church for the masses. Buy my coffee. Ufology for, I don't know. He's one who promoted like what was it? David Wilcock too, or David Wilcock and Corey Good, right? Wasn't he like a big supporter of those guys?
Yeah, he. From what I know about him, I did appear. When he started his show after going to college to learn how to do it, and then he was involved with Art Bell and his platform that he used to have. A friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, could you call up this show because he's new and he's not going to get a lot of calls?" And we talked for like an hour because nobody was calling because he was new, right? And he was. It's interesting that he was doing the Art Bell thing where just have anybody on, you've got to fill the time 5 days a week and let them spew and move on to the next story.
And he's still doing that.
Yes, because it does pay the bills. If you're willing to do that, it can pay the bills.
Yeah. You probably won't win a Pulitzer or any, sort of journalistic awards, but you'll get sponsors.
Well, you got to be worried about doing that stuff too, because then another I forget what was that group in San Diego that committed
Heaven's
suicide?
Gate.
Yeah, you could have a Heaven's Gate fall in your lap again, like Art, and that wasn't good for him. Now he sort of maneuvered that fairly well as you could, but he was giving people, they remote viewed it and there's a ship behind it and this and that, and then these people.
Those people are back in the mix again. I don't know if you're aware of that. Courtney Brown and one of the girls, her name was Prudence something, but now she goes by Birdie.
Calabresi.
Yeah.
Prudence Calabresi.
Just learned that the other day that they were connected to all that. Although I don't really blame them, right? They weren't part of the cult and they weren't saying, go kill yourself off this. But the cult did run with their quote-unquote remote viewing
Brown
reads.
did step on his dick. Okay? Believe me, I know all about that case. As a matter of fact, I was somewhat involved in it. The guy that took the photograph of the Saturn-like object, the SLO.
From Hawaii, I think?
No, from Texas.
Okay.
Was a guy by the name of Chuck Schrammick.
Yeah, that's right.
And Chuck Schrammick had been a big fan of mine when I was doing my show on CRN. He used to call in. Now, Schrammick was a radio guy, and he had a hell of a sense of humor, all right? He'd call into my show, and we'd laugh and have a good time. Well, he was an amateur astronomer, took that photograph, didn't know what it was, okay? And he sent it to Bell. And he told Bell, I don't know what it is. And he said, I checked my star charts. I did this. I did that. Didn't happen. Well, Art started to ride that pony. And you know what Art Bell was like. Okay.
Yep.
He rode that for all it was worth. And then he started bringing others on the show. Major Ed Dames, Dr. Doom. And Ed Dames remotely viewed this thing. And Ed Dames said, oh, it's carrying a pathogen on board. The thing, I've remotely viewed this. It's going to come over and it's going to dump the pathogen on Earth. Okay. And it's going to cause vegetation to start to die. Cattle are going to die. There's going to be no milk for babies. Now, Bell was running this crap every bloody night. Well, at that time, Bo and Peep, the Heaven's Gate couple, okay,
Yep,
now
right.
she had already died. Now, Marshall Applewhite was the guy's real name.
Yep.
All right. They had a gig going with their cult members down in San Diego doing web stuff, okay, all these computers. And they were basically doing a business. Well, he had them convinced that this thing was a spaceship and it was calling to them, okay, to come and join our spaceship crew. And basically these morons, one of the morons was Nichelle Nichols' brother from Star Trek.
Yep.
Okay. They all ended up drinking the poison Kool-Aid and they all died. Well, when that happened, my wife and I were publishing UFO magazine. Suddenly, the damn phone started ringing off the hook. And as a little bit of time went by, because of Art and what he did with that story, and why he never questioned any of these people, Courtney Brown came on his program. Now, this is something somebody ought to ask Brown about. He wouldn't communicate with us. He claimed that a first-rate astronomer had photographed this thing, could verify it was an alien spaceship, and he was going to come out in a couple of weeks. Well, obviously, that never happened. Then Bell started getting put on the hot seat about all this. And he started whining and crying and sniveling, and he brought Whitley Strieber on. And then they ended up going, or one of them, I think it was Whitley, went on Larry King Live and falsely claimed, oh, well, you know, Art and I, we solved that mystery. That we knew there was nothing to it, which was total bullshit. I ended up writing a paper about that, about Heaven's Gate, because I didn't think it was right that Bell was being accused of leading to the deaths of all these cultists. Okay. The guy was just, hey, look, he was an entertainer, period.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
But he did have culpability when he never questioned any of these people. Like Ed Dames, for example. Whatever happened to Ed Dames? He kind of went under the radar, didn't he?
Yeah.
He just kind of gone. Okay.
Well, as Art would say, I'm not a reporter. I am a reporter. That pretty much sums it up right there.
Yeah.
Okay, Don, that's it, buddy. Time's up.
Oh no! Are we out of
Yeah.
time? Okay,
Bill Skywatcher said is like, okay, you guys are having too much fun. We got to end this.
Okay, guys, Manny, Red Panda, thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. As always, great
Thank
to
you,
have
guys.
you here. And Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 Eastern, UAP Crossfire, and we're gonna have another bang up show. That's it, gang. Good night. Thank you, one and all.
Bye, everyone.
God
Peace.
bless Sam and Dean Winchester.